So then we will now conclude our discussions on contemplating on death and impermanence at this point. But as a parting word, as a remark of conclusion, I would like to say that if one strives for spiritual practice, it is important that we make that practice an effective one, a meaningful one, and as such, from a Buddhist perspective, we call effective and meaningful spiritual practice pure spiritual practice. So as such, if one really wants to develop and cultivate such a pure practice, I think it is very, very important that we contemplate on death and impermanence in our daily lives. Because as someone who strives for spirituality, it is important that we find the time to contemplate on death and impermanence, because it can help us in the initial stages of our spiritual practice to find the motivation to engage spiritual practice, and in the course of our actual practice, it can also help us become more enthusiastic about our spiritual practice, and ultimately it can also help us to attain and achieve the results of spiritual practice that we desire and that we seek. So as such, if you are someone who strives for spiritual practice, please know that it is important to reflect and remember, reflect on and remember death and impermanence from time to time. Now, with that being said, I can understand that many people actually find this topic, particularly death, a sensitive topic, and they don't really want to talk about it, and they don't want to discuss it at all. This is the kind of reaction that I have found among people. But with that being said, practically, I think it is also important to be able to reflect on death and impermanence from time to time, to come to terms with it, to come to accept it as an unavoidable part of our lives. So even the Buddha himself, when he first taught, he found it important to teach about impermanence, and even in his last teaching, he also stressed the importance of understanding the impermanent nature of all phenomena. So as such, we should take this purpose of reflecting on death and impermanence to our hearts in our spiritual practice. Now, I can understand that when we talk about death and impermanence a lot in our spiritual discussions, some people really do find these discussions a little bit uneasy, and as such, they become irritable when we are talking about death all the time. That even though we are alive at this point, why do we need to talk about death all the time? So it kind of unsettles them. But if you are someone who actually strives for spirituality, I think it is important to reflect on death and impermanence from time to time. Now, we have, in our discussion about training in the preliminaries, covered the contemplation on the human life, complete with its freedoms and advantages, and our contemplation on death and impermanence. Now moving forward, we'll begin to look at karma, or our actions and their consequences. So now, when we are looking at karma, we are looking at the characteristics of karma and the manner in which karma functions. So as such, we will look at the general characteristics of karma for the purposes of our discussion, because I don't think we would really have the time to look at karma in such great detail. So for the purposes of our discussion, we will look at the general characteristics of karma. And herein, the Buddha talked about 4 such general characteristics that we need to appreciate about karma. So now, these 4 general characteristics of karma that we need to appreciate, as the Buddha taught, are in this manner. First, we need to contemplate, reflect, and appreciate the fact that karma is certain, karma is fixed. And then second, then the second point to contemplate on is that karma shows great increase. Karma can increase, the potency of a karma can increase exponentially. So the third point to contemplate on karma is that one does not meet the result of a karma that one has not accumulated. And then the third is that karma is not exhausted on its own. Now, when we look at the first such characteristic of karma, then it is the fact that karma is certain. Now herein, when we say that karma is certain, we need to reflect on the Buddha's own words in the Vinaya, in the sutras, wherein he begins to say that for any particular kind of action that you engage in, there is a corresponding result. So karma, if we have to understand it, the word itself simply refers to our actions, as opposed to motion, action. So, simply understood, then the manner in which karma is certain and karma is fixed is the manner in which it manifests. It's a fact that if you begin to engage in negative actions, non-virtuous actions, then you will begin to experience suffering. And if you begin to engage in virtuous and positive actions, then you can begin to experience happiness. Now herein it is important to understand that how exactly does karma work in such in such a way. So, with regards relating it to with regards to our own actions, then if our actions are informed by a pure intention, and then if these actions are virtuous in their nature and these actions help others, then as a result we begin to experience happiness, not only happiness ourselves, and not only that, it also brings happiness to others. Now, similarly, if our actions are motivated by ill intentions and the actions in themselves inflict harm, suffering onto others, then as a result we become unhappy ourselves, and also we bring suffering to others.
계속 그리고 때가 빼다가 나와 있는 기술이 너는 만나고지 가르치는 신기 기술이 현재도 되게 막강한지 로봇이 되게 비교도 되게 만나고지 와이는 그런 이제는 평균 자원 두번 만씩 이제는 평균 연구를 될때는 바로 만나는 디지 연구를 돼 소소하게 가르쳐서 저는 가와 배 디지 오투치 연구에 받는 거는 기술만 도치니다 문도 다시 중대 지로 왔어 다음은 신기 기술이 뭐지는 뭐지기 기술이는 진짜는 가비는 내세라고 제도와이는 저 딜레디니 지금 바로 보러 맞지 뭐 연구들이 소소하게 사는 안도 말해봐 즉 사자 바로와 있는 지 신호가 말아도 도수 뒤뒤진 놓은 거에 이 연구도 와서 계속 가려서 와 있는 아마도 지수를 놓나 아니 이 말을 소소기 주의 용이터를 배 민통나 시작을 차대야 대신 보고 알아서 무슨 통다야 민통 때야 어디 연구도 와서 도시 차대게 해야 되지요.
And I don't think that we really need to explain this fact, because through our own lived experiences in our communities, in our societies, we can understand that this is true. For example, in a society, if there is someone who dedicate themselves towards public welfare, towards the welfare of others, engaging in social service, and so forth, then naturally these kind of people not only help others, alleviate the suffering of others, make others happy, but they themselves derive a true sense of fulfillment in what they are doing, a true sense of joy in what they are doing. So as such, they are very happy people. Now, as opposed to that, we also know that in our societies, there are many people who are constantly engaged in conflicts, arguments with others, who actively inflict harm and suffering on others. So as such, not only do they inflict harm and suffering on others, but also they themselves have to live in a constant state of anxiety, paranoia, mistrust, and so forth. That's all.
다들이 이제 이바디 가르쳐서 다도도 강다 가르치는 링이바 시아들이 자고 가르치 도와이는 디베 데리트가 연구를 담게 도도라고 이제는 피미 자와 도와이는 라신이가 디베데라 디지 연구를 니비 자와이는 라신이가 디비 가르치는 동아리 연구를 도도라고 단자사라고 대자를
So just to sum up our discussion on the first point, how karma is fixed, in simple terms, it just points to the fact that for any particular kind of action, there is a corresponding result, not only for ourselves, but for others too. So simply, if we engage in virtuous actions which benefit others with a pure motivation, this not only brings happiness for ourselves, but for others too, as a result of these actions. And similarly, if we engage in negative actions informed by ill intentions, which inflict harm, which bring suffering to others, then this not only makes others unhappy and others suffer, but it also makes us suffer and unhappy in the long run. Now the second general characteristic of karma that we need to reflect on is the fact that karma shows great increase, that karma, the potency of a karma, can increase exponentially. So herein it refers to the fact that a small action can result in can bring forth a great result. So, for example, as we already touched upon, that it is said that there are karma which can impel us, which can dictate our births for 500 lifetimes.
다 내가 빼라고 가르쳐서 저는 빼냐 술루기 가르치는 빼냐 컴퓨터가 있는 컴퓨터 파티하기 사배도 중요하고 지마도 이 말이 유마디기 리베야 지용도 아니 가면 너무 지 감동을 지는 버거스니 진동하나 모용돼야 둘이지 용 빼들려 자니 파티하기 사배 중요한 데는 리뷰들이 뭐고 유비와 딜리죠 나무가도 340이 리시아디 리 중종 칸이 신이만하고 딜러와라고 있는 되게 오는 기와 말 왜냐면 밑이 가라서는 연대로도 중요하잖아. 나는 가라서는 둘이지 신도자지라고 나와 있는 둘이가 오는 기와 가지 않아요. 소소하게 남이 도잘 못해야. 둘이지 그래서 되지죠.
So the example that is used to highlight the fact that karma shows great increase is with this example that from that small seed of apricot we plant, then a whole tree grows out of it. So the cause itself could be small like that seed, but the result is that a whole tree grows out of it. Then with regards to our own karma, then the manner in which it increases exponentially is far greater than this example of the seed growing into a tree. So it is said that by simply uttering a harsh word towards an ordained person, then it could dictate our birth for the next 500 lifetimes. Now the third general characteristic of karma is the fact that one does not meet the result of a karma that one has not accumulated. So simply one does not meet the result of an action that one has not engaged in. So in short, this means that all our experience of joy, happiness, suffering, and so forth is caused by our own actions, by the karma that we have accumulated. It is not the case that we begin to experience happiness and suffering without having accumulated the karma for it. So in the classical scriptural text, then they cite these kind of examples that in the face of a same disaster with the same group, then they are, even if everybody dies, there are cases wherein a single person does not die. So this comes from the fact that that single person who survives the disaster has not accumulated the karma to experience death in the face of these kind of disaster. So simply, when we say that one does not meet the result of an action or of karma that one has not accumulated, it simply refers to the fact that the result of experiences of suffering and happiness come indeed from our own actions. It does not come from someone else's actions or someone else's karma. Now, the fourth general characteristic of karma that we need to reflect on is that karma, once accumulated, does not disappear on its own. That karma, once accumulated, is not exhausted on its own. So herein, it refers to the fact that karma even if it does not manifest itself in the form of a result immediately, then at a certain point in the future, when the conducive conditions are met, then karma will for sure manifest itself in the form of a result.
제도 딱 그리 지금 그래서는 그냥 아주 데려와 가래서 와이나 돌이 리진 딱 리는 까바제 주면서 소식들 너는 디빈 거지 가래서 그래서는 리사리 뒤를 가서 저러와 있나요 리디기 디피시야데 리디니바 차도네 디빈 메바 차도야도 리 주종라고 있는지 메바 차도야도 뒤에 톨라도니 디빈 메다바 뒤에 연구되어서는 자원이 연구 말했어 나도 잘라지 사별로 신다고 지이나 영로고 뭐 쉬어지도 니바냐니 디비치 미바 메바다 어느 바로 제가 라바샤도야 뒤뒤도 뭐지 이거 그래서 소소가 사시에 비리 저런 로카스도 가시선도 로로와 있는 디니바 차도야도 데리지 존이 메바 차도야 디 취주지로와 뒤뒤도 왜 말했어 남시가 찐도 튀니가서 그런 마마 사시야 비리 디디 다다다다 지미고리 마도 디 마메고데 아니 톨라로야 지요에서는
And the teachings in the sutra are very specific about it, about this. And in the sutras, there are verses which go along the lines of the karma that sentient beings accumulate does not disappear on its own, or does not become ineffectual over a period of time. That when the right causes and conditions come into being, then the karma manifests itself in the form of a result. So as opposed to the example of a seed, which can become insipid, ineffectual, and disintegrate and become old and ineffective over a period of time, our karma is not like that. Karma, once accumulated, will manifest itself in the form of a result. Now, with that being said, it is important to understand here we are discussing that we cannot expect for karma to disappear or become ineffectual or to exhaust itself on its own. But when we are talking about our spiritual practice, then even if we have accumulated a negative karma, a bad karma in our previous life, then if we take it upon ourselves to purify these negative karma by depending on what we call the four powers, then the karma can be overcome. Then we can ensure that this karma does not manifest itself in the form of an unfavorable result, in the form of an unfavorable experience. In such context, then indeed it is the case that through the process of purification, by depending on the four powers, then negative karma can effectively be overcome. Now, to sum up our discussion on these four characteristics of karma, we cannot expect for karma to disappear on its own accord, but unless and until we take it upon ourselves to address our negative karma that we have accumulated by purifying them with the four powers, then we cannot really expect not to experience the result of that karma. Now, with this, we conclude our discussion on reflections on karma, the characteristics of karma, how it functions. Now, moving on, still discussing the training in preliminaries, we now arrive at the discussion on the unsatisfactory nature of samsaric existence. Now, herein, when we are talking about reflecting on the unsatisfactory nature of samsaric existence, in effect, this is a method to help us to develop true sense of renunciation. A true sense of renunciation refers to developing the determination to be free from samsaric suffering. Now, renunciation herein refers to becoming disgusted with samsaric existence, becoming totally dissatisfied with samsaric existence. Now, if we are to develop that determination to be free from samsaric existence, we must be able to understand, we must be able to generate within ourselves a sadness, within ourselves a sense of dissatisfaction about the nature of samsara. Now, if we are to generate within ourselves this sadness, this dissatisfaction, then we need to reflect on the faults or the drawbacks of samsaric existence. And if we are to do that, we need to reflect on the suffering in samsaric existence. So, in our general reflection on the suffering of samsara, we begin to first understand that there is no realm in samsara which is free from suffering at all. So, when we look at the hell realm, which is in samsara, then in hell realm, the existence is marked by extreme suffering of cold, heat, and so forth. Then similarly, in the hungry ghost realm, then existence is marked by extreme hunger and thirst. Then similarly, when we look at animals, we understand that animals lack discernment and intelligence. So as such, their intelligence is diluted and obscured. And with regards to human beings in the human realm, then we undergo the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death. So as such, there is no point or realm in samsara where there is no suffering at all. So by reflecting on the fact that as long as one is born in samsara, then one cannot hope to avoid suffering at all, that all forms of existence in samsara is marked by suffering. And with that reflection, one should be able to develop within oneself the determination to be free from suffering. So if you are able to reflect on samsara and the different realms of samsara in this manner and begin to understand that no matter what kind of life form that you take birth in, no matter where you take birth in samsara, one cannot hope to avoid suffering at all, then one begins to develop a sense of sadness, a sense of dissatisfaction with samsaric existence, and then on the basis of that, one begins to develop a wish to be free from suffering, and on the basis of that, one must be able to develop a pure resolve and determination to be free from samsaric existence itself. So at that point, you would have developed true renunciation. Now, coming back to the root text itself, all of this discussion pertains to and is related to the first instruction. First, train in the preliminaries. So this is the manner in which we need to train in the preliminaries, by reflecting on these points. Now we will move further along with the text itself. And now moving forward, we arrive at the main or the actual practice of mind training itself. So what we call mind training, lo meaning mind, jong meaning training. What we call mind training or lojong effectively refers to training in bodhicitta, training in relative and ultimate bodhicitta. So when we are talking about the actual or the main practice of mind training, that then it refers to training in bodhicitta. And in this, there are two parts, training in ultimate bodhicitta and training in relative bodhicitta. Now, in the presentation of the instructions on the basis of the 7 points of mind training, then one trains first in ultimate bodhicitta. So then, when we look at the actual text itself, when the instruction starts in this manner, consider all things and events as dreamlike. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. Let even the antidote be freed in its own place. Rest in the alaya, the essence. Between sessions, be a conjurer of illusions. Now, up to this point, the instructions refer to training in ultimate bodhicitta. So herein, when we say that these first 5 lines are the instructions on training in ultimate bodhicitta herein refers to cultivating the correct view of emptiness. So before we begin to actively reflect and contemplate on emptiness as a part of training in the ultimate bodhicitta, then we need there is a set of we need to train in preparing to reflect and contemplate on emptiness. So as such, before you begin to meditate to reflect and contemplate on emptiness, you prepare first by stabilizing the mind a little bit. Before you actively contemplate on emptiness, you practice breath meditation. You focus your attention on your breath, stabilize your attention on the breath up to counts of 21 to let the mind become restful, calm. And there is a purpose to preparing in this manner by first meditating on our breath, because it is the case that at any given point when we look at our minds are very restless in their nature, with a lot of thoughts and a lot of emotions running incessantly. And these kind of thoughts and emotions in Buddhism, we call them discursive thoughts and emotions. So if we practice breath meditation beforehand, then it helps us to pacify these discursive thoughts and emotions. So as such, the mind becomes more calm, more restful.
Somebody Nando Mobaji Sum Trudi Katola, Tabu Gamja, and Gamushi, Yawaji Chagaros, and Chagamaras, one of the Hojunda, somebody is to learn about the Hinja Baby Katola, Chigoja of Chihuahua, and he bought the Carson, Hojon TV, you got to see what you want now, and he Carson, Louis, Lila, Chata, or to do the Chihuahua to us.
So this is important to take into account when we actually begin to meditate on something like emptiness, that if our minds are restless, if our minds have if our minds are tormented by discursive thoughts and emotions, then we cannot really effectively contemplate on emptiness. We cannot expect ourselves to effectively conduct meditation on emptiness. Because our minds are very restless, so it cannot really rationally analyze or focus or stably focus our attention in meditation. And this we can begin to appreciate it when we look at any kind of activity that we undertake in our life, that when we are calm, we are able to engage with that activity more meaningfully. Our attention is more clear, more stable when our minds are calm. Now that's one thing. Another thing, another benefit and another purpose of preparing beforehand by meditating on our breath is that we are training our attention by focusing on the breath. We are training our attention to be more stable. We are training our attention to focus singularly on the object of meditation. So as such, it helps us to achieve clarity, to help us to achieve stability in our meditation. So this is indeed true when we look at our meditative experiences and when we look at the manner in which our minds function. Outside of meditation, when we look at our minds, then it's very restless in its nature. And now, if we immediately begin to meditate and expect the mind to become calm, then maybe that's not a realistic approach at all. So as such, we need to cultivate and develop stability in our meditation first. So as such, you train your attention by focusing on the breath. And it is also the case that we cannot immediately begin to expect to be able to focus singularly on our breath, because through our own experience, we can attest to the fact that it is very, very difficult and almost impossible to sustain the attention on the object of meditation without being distracted at all, even for the duration of a minute, unless and until we bring ourselves to train our attention to be able to do so. So, before we begin to follow the instructions on training in the ultimate bodhicitta by reflecting on emptiness, one must first prepare by meditating on our breath to cultivate some sense of calm, some sense of stability, some sense of clarity. And after experiencing the mind becoming calm, the mind becoming clear and stable, then begin to meditate on the instruction, consider all things and events like dreams. Now, by developing some sense of calm, stability, and clarity, then we begin in our meditation to stabilize our attention on this instruction. Consider all things and events as dreamlike. So in short, it means consider all phenomena as dreamlike. So herein, a metaphor is being used to explain emptiness, that all phenomena should be understood as dreamlike as being dreamlike in their nature. So if we are to understand this instruction, first we need to look at the experience of dream itself. So in our dreams, a house can appear, a thing, any kind of object can appear in our dreams. A mountain can appear, a river can appear. All manner of things, all kind of phenomena can appear in our dream. But it's just that, it's just an appearance. Wherein if we begin to look effectively to see whether they appear as it exists in our dreams, then it doesn't exist at all. It's just appearances. So as it is the case that all phenomena that appears in our dreams are simply appearances, and when we effectively look to see whether they exist as it appears, then it is the case that it doesn't exist as it appears at all. So similarly, all phenomena that we perceive, all phenomena in our world is no different actually. That when we begin to effectively investigate whether they exist as they appear, then they do not really exist as they appear. When we begin to find and look for these things, then apart from their appearance, there is nothing which we can effectively point towards and say that this is it. So all kind of phenomena, all the realms, all the sentient beings do not exist by way of their own power, by way of their own nature. They simply exist as appearances. If we effectively begin to investigate if phenomena, sentient beings, realms, establishes their existence through their own power, then this is not the case at all. Now, when we begin to say that things simply exist as mere appearances and that things do not establish themselves objectively, then it is a little bit difficult to immediately make sense of this. It is difficult to immediately accept this and fit it within our own perspective, unless and until you have some training in what we call the Madhyamika philosophy or the middle way philosophy, then maybe this is difficult to approach immediately. So, when we look at the great Madhyamika philosophers such as Nagarjuna, when he begins to say that all phenomena are merely imputed by the conceptual thought, and as such, if we begin to look for an objective existence of phenomena, we will not be able to find it. So as such, things are not objectively established, but they simply exist, that they merely exist by way of imputation by our conceptual thoughts. Yes. So, the same master, Nagarjuna, instructs us to reflect on this in this manner, that all of our experiences are filtered through this conception of I that we have, what we in Buddhism call person or self. So we can all say that we can all say that we have an experience of this I or this self. Now examine this self or examine this I carefully. So he begins to instruct us to examine this I and this self that we experience. And then in his work, Precious Garland of Reasoning, he begins to instruct us to examine this I and its existence in this manner, that when you look at it carefully, that then this self, or this self of the person, is not the elements which make up, are not the elements. It's not a person is not the water element, a person is not the fire element, a person is not the air, the person is not the earth, the person is not the space, the person is not the heat. So the person is none of these constituents at all, elemental constituents at all.
제가 강사 시야디 박로이 바바자리 마다 바쥐나 아니 강사 시야디 공부미 미들이 시야디 강사지 니야지 주주사지 요에스나 요라레스 뭐디 두지 송요에스.
So when he says that the person is none of these elemental constituents, he is simply referring to the fact that the person is not that the person does not exist in any of these elemental constituents, that the person, if we were to look for it, we cannot find it even in the collection of these elemental constituents. Then how exactly does the person exist? The person exists simply as an imputation by our minds on the basis of these elemental constituents.
다지 로이 부통 편은 독세 로이 샤워자를 봐. 조주사에 다라는 파티 추니 지 데그레 조주사에 다기 실라데 강사데 데레 실라와도 조주사에 라게르스나 추니 조주사에 말에 어때시 그래서.
So more closely to ourselves, maybe we can begin to explore this kind of instruction in this manner, that if you are asked where is Geshe, then you would without doubt begin to point towards here and say, this is Geshe, here is Geshe. And even if I am asked where is Geshe, then I would begin to point towards my body and begin to say that here I am, here is Geshe. But even though in our minds there is an appearance of Geshe, which we think that we can effectively point towards and say that this is Geshe, that's just an appearance. If we are to effectively really look at the referent object of that term Geshe, and if we are to pinpoint something, pinpoint towards something and say that this is effectively Geshe, then we won't find such an object at all.
수루고 주고 샤르를 봤어야지 기실다 데려에서는 말이지. 아니 대 노노기 다치 노년게 와도 정말 그 레리는 파츠로 와이나 대형 기시 가서 기실다 데려에서는 말이지. 다음 시기 가르에서는 너무 차도 치실라도 같아서 레에서는 말이지. 그러니까 아 노노를 같이 와이나 기실은 데레세 주수사지 예에서는 여말에 세 어떻게 자리를 해야지.
So we think that by simply pointing towards the body of Geshe, we are pointing towards Geshe. But this is, when we begin to examine it closely, this is not the case at all. When we are pointing towards the body, then what part of the body exactly is the Geshe? The body is made out of flesh and bones. Is the flesh and bones Geshe? And then it is made out of these constituent organs too. And are the organs Geshe? Then there are blood, pus, nerves, and so forth that pervades the entirety of the body. So is that Geshe? So we cannot really find a referent object to the term Geshe when we begin to effectively investigate what exactly is it referring to. Is there something that we can pinpoint to effectively and say that this is Geshe? Now, we need to be able to bring this kind of understanding back to our discussion. Now, what the instruction effectively is saying that when we say that I saw the Geshe, the Geshe or the person of Geshe simply appears in our minds when the body appears. When our sense perception cognizes the body, but it simply exists as that, an appearance in the mind. But in the objective side itself, in the body that we perceive, there is no Geshe at all. Now, when it says, consider all things and events as dreamlike, so as it is in the case of in our experience of dreams, even though many things appear, if we are to effectively look for it and to see if it really exists, then it doesn't really exist at all. It simply exists as an appearance in our minds. So similarly, when we look for Geshe, simply exists as an appearance in our mind on the basis of the body appearing to the mind. But if we are to effectively say that the body is Geshe, then we cannot really say that, because then we should be able to find a Geshe in and among the body itself. This is not the case. So as such, all things and events are dreamlike in their nature. So that is exactly the reason why the Master Nagarjuna says that the person is not each of the constituent elements, is not the collection of the constituent elements. The person is simply an imputation. The person is simply imputed by the mind on the basis of this collection of constituent elements. Because if we are to look for the person in each of these constituent elements, we cannot find it. If we are to look for the person in the collection of the constituent elements, we will not be able to find it. Now, when we look closely at Nagarjuna's assertion, when he begins to say that the person is not each of these constituent elements, the person is neither not the collection of these constituent elements either, and there is no person apart from the collection of these constituent elements, then what exactly is the person? Then the person is simply an imputation. The person is simply imputed on the basis of the collection of these constituent elements. So he begins to instruct us to examine that is the earth element, which manifests itself in the form of flesh and bones in our body, is that the person? Is the water element, which manifests itself in the form of blood and pus in our body, is that the person? Is the heat and warmth that pervades our body the person? Is the wind and the air that travels through the channels through the nerves, the person, then that's not the case. Then it is the consciousness which pervades the body. Is it the person? Then this is not the case at all. Then it is the space that exists between these energy channels, these nerves in our body. Is it the person? Then this is also not the case. Then is the collection of all of these things the person? Then this is also not the case. Then is there a person that is apart from the collection of these elements? Then this is also not the case. So what exactly is the person? The person is simply being imputed by the mind on the basis of these collection of constituents. So we'll stop here and break for lunch.